Hello, and welcome to the Poetry Pea with me, Patricia. Way back in June 2025, I had planned to create a podcast exploring the poetry of Chiyo-ni, the nun Chiyo-ni, who lived in the 18th century, sometime around 1703 to 1775. Why? Well, in the first instance, because when people talk about the haiku masters, they talk about all the chaps, Bashō, Buson, Issa and Shiki, and rarely of Chiyo-ni. I'm not going to speculate about the reasons. But why do it now? Well, I was in a Zoom session recently when some of my fellow haijin were lamenting the paucity of lyrical poetry in modern haiku. My gut tells me they're right, but in the next month or so, interspersed with other poetry, I want to explore lyrical poetry from the masters through to the present day. So, just so we're on the same page, I'm going to tell you what I think lyrical means. You may disagree, in which case, tell me. You may disagree that there is a scarcity of lyrical haiku in today's canon, in which case I ask you to prove it and send me some English language haiku that in your opinion is lyrical, with citations of course, and perhaps I can use them in a future podcast. You know, when I'm seeking out a lyrical poem, I'm looking for some emotional connection to its content, and that's often enhanced by a poem's musicality. I know there's at least one person out there who thinks I shouldn't be including musicality in my definition of lyrical poetry, but I disagree, as the rhythm of the spoken word can add so much to a poem, and I think perhaps it's gone AWOL from the toolkit of many writing haiku today. Oh, and just to go back to the emotional connection, I really don't want my emotions blatantly manipulated, as I sometimes feel poets trying to write haiku do. Now, back to Chiyo-ni. Of course, as English speakers, we have to read her work in translation, which in itself, as I've frequently said, has its own problems. Translators may not be the best, they may not have an understanding of haiku, and they may be influenced by the prevailing trends of their day. That said, when I went to find her poetry, I didn't find too many translations, and some were so horrible, I just couldn't read them to you. And that led me to wonder, why has she been so overlooked? Again, I have my thoughts, but I'm not going to go there. So let's find out a little bit about Chiyo-ni. The one thing everybody knows, and I've already mentioned, is that she was a nun. But to fill in a few more details, she was apparently writing poetry from the age of 7. She got to know the poetry of Bashō around the age of 12, and was a rather popular poet in Japan by the age of 17. I read one source that said she knew Bashō, but unless she had the power of time travel, that's not possible. Instead, she had the next best thing. Her mentors were the students of Bashō. I reckon Shiko, who had a school in her home city, was probably the most influential of those mentors, but I could be wrong. So let's hear some poetry and find out why she was so popular. Oh, and before I go on, let's address the elephant in the room. Have I only chosen translations that suit my needs? Well, yes and no. Yes, because I didn't bring you those really horrible translations. And no, because I couldn't afford to be too picky. There really are not too many translations out there. Some poetry then. I'll start with one you probably know and give you a few translations just to illustrate my point, and then I'll stick to one poem, one translation. Morning glory, the well bucket entangled, I ask for water. Morning glory, the well bucket entangled, I ask for water. And that one was translated by Donegan and Ishibashi. The morning glory beat me to it. I go to the neighbour to fetch water. The morning glory beat me to it. I go to the neighbour to fetch water. Translated by Gabby Grieve. My well bucket taken by the morning glory, this borrowed water. My well bucket taken by the morning glory, this borrowed water. And that was translated by Ueda. I don't know about you, but the one that connects most with me is the first, by Donegan and Ishibashi. Morning glory, the well bucket entangled, I ask for water. Soaring skylark, what do you think of the limitless sky? Soaring skylark, what do you think of the limitless sky? Translated by Donegan and Ishibashi. Throughout the fields, mountains, not one thing stirring, snowy morn. Throughout the fields, mountains, not one thing stirring, snowy morn. Translated by Adam Kern. My hunter of butterflies, how far has he wandered today? My hunter of butterflies, how far has he wandered today? And that was translated by Rexroth and Atsumi. Supposedly the poem is about Chiyo-ni's child who died, although there is some dispute about it. However, the subtlety with which she writes this poem leaves me with a wistful, maybe even melancholic feeling, rather than a feeling that I've been manipulated by over-sentimentality. The butterfly, behind, before, behind, a woman on the road. The butterfly, behind, before, behind, a woman on the road. Translated by Ueda. Autumn's bright moon. However far I walked, still far off in an unknown sky. Autumn's bright moon. However far I walked, still far off in an unknown sky. And that was translated by R.H. Blythe. Autumn field. Some grasses flower, some grasses don't. Autumn field. Some grasses flower, some grasses don't. Translated by Donegan and Ishibashi. The dew of the rouge flower, when it's spilled, is only water. The dew of the rouge flower, when it's spilled, is only water. Translated by Blythe. The summer moon is touched by the line of the fishing rod. The summer moon is touched by the line of the fishing rod. Translated by Blythe. O butterfly, what are you dreaming there, fanning your wings? O butterfly, what are you dreaming there, fanning your wings. Translated by Blythe. I don't know if you've noticed, but Chiyo-ni often uses the question within her poem, asking wistful questions about things she cannot know, how far the butterfly, or in some translations, dragonfly, has gone this day. What is the butterfly dreaming? What is the skylark thinking? I've seen a few people use it in contemporary poetry, but maybe it's a device we could use more often. In the river alone, darkness is flowing. The fireflies. In the river alone, darkness is flowing. The fireflies. Translated by Blythe. And don't you just love the juxtaposition of the darkness of the river and all above it being brightly lit? First wild geese, a lengthening line of long nights. First wild geese, a lengthening line of long nights. Translated by Michael Haldane. Has Chiyo-ni expressed how you feel when you know the nights are drawing in? Do they flower dreaming of a spring night, blossoms out of season? Do they flower dreaming of a spring night, blossoms out of season? And that's translated by Ueda. And for those of you who've been with me for years, you'll understand I could not leave this one out, as it so expresses the almost annual events in my magnolia's life. 100 gourds from the heart of one vine. 100 gourds from the heart of one vine. And that was translated by Donegan and Ishibashi. I don't plant gourds myself, but I do plant cherry tomatoes most years. And my goodness, the number of cherry tomatoes I can get from one plant, it's amazing. Which reminds me, I really must sort that out this year. It's time I went looking for some tomato plants. If not for its cries, the white heron would disappear. Morning snow. If not for its cries, the white heron would disappear. Morning snow. Translated by Richard Tice. And one last poem to close out the podcast. And what an appropriate poem, I thought. I know at least one of you love this poem, and I have come to love it as well. I also saw the moon, and so I say goodbye to this world. I also saw the moon, and so I say goodbye to this world. And that version is translated by Donegan and Ishibashi. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the poetry and you could feel the subtlety of the emotions. And although this is difficult to judge in a translation, the rhythm, the music of the words, which to me adds so much to a haiku. Now, you have a mission or two if you fancy helping me out. What do you think of my definition of the lyrical poem? Thoughts in an email, please. Do you have a favourite lyrical haiku written in English? Let me know, with citations, please. Last and not least, please think about supporting the podcast with a membership. a coffee, or at least a shout out to your poetry friends. I'd be so grateful. And one last thing, and you might know this already, but the Donegan and Ishibashi book that I've taken some of the translations from has just been republished, so you might want to have a look. I'll put a link to Amazon on the website. You don't have to buy it there, obviously, but if you do, the podcast does get a tiny weeny commission. I mean, tiny. But if you'd rather buy it elsewhere, at least you have the details. So till next week, keep writing. Oh, and don't forget, make sure you're on the mailing list. Ciao!